Welcome to the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast. I'm Eric Charlson.
Wow, this is a great way to climb mountains and come down, you know.
For our reception, our Vulcan buddies brought acid.
I was dropping in and snaking people and causing shit.
I remember calling on the radio and I'm like, Brushy, where are you? You know,
Greg would do the tricks. He was kind of like the Tony Hawk of snowboarding.
I mean, people just really gravitated to the backcountry.
I liked Craig, but he didn't really care for me too much because I was a little shithead.
Our guest this week is Jeffrey Fulton, who we had an episode with last year, and it was just a chairlift ride. So this is a more in-depth episode with Jeff, recorded at his house in Glacier, Washington.
My parents owned a bike shop in down in Mount Vernon, Washington. I loved it growing up because I had bikes, and it was like people that came in the shop, they're excited to buy a bike. So we BMX started. I started kind of getting involved with that. And then my parents decided to have a BMX team, you know, because there was BMX races going all over the state. I was the one old enough to drive, so I started driving the van around. And then next few years, Craig and a few of the Mount Vernon kids, they're hanging out in the bike shop, and so they run the BMX team. And so I was driving them around all the BMX races. I remember I looked in a magazine called Action Now. One of the shots in the back of the magazine was Jake Burton Carpenter riding a snowboard at Mount Hood, like in 1979 in the summer slush. You know, and it was an ad for Burton Snowboards. I was like, wow, that's pretty rad. And then at the same time, I took a trip down to Southern California for a bike race with a bunch of the Bike Factory boys. They were making their own snowboards. So we went to this trip to California, stopped at the sand dunes in Oregon, and I got to try one of the dudes' homemade snowboards. So I tried to make my own snowboard that fall and took it up and hiked around Baker a little bit and rode a little bit. And it's just like, you know, it's just like an old water ski that I fucked around with. So it kind of worked, but didn't work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then that's when I saw that ad for the Burton Snowboards, and it was the Burton Backhill, like their first, you know. So I ordered one of those, got that in, and it was just like pretty much their rope on the nose, rubber deck, one rubber strap in the front that you stuck your foot in with a little heel strap, and then it had just this little thin strap in the back, a round tail. It was flat bottom, and it had just two fins on the sides. It was springtime after Baker closed, and we went up and hiked up Austin and rode. There was like, right there on Panface, there's like, you know where the road is, and there's always those formed up. So we hiked up there. So this guy's like, I know where there's this quarter pipe. You know? Because we were all kind of skateboarders and bikers back then, so we were kind of like always looking for, you know, skate park was a big deal because a lot of them were dying back then. So we were looking for stuff that simulated skate stuff, and so there was this wave, and so we went up and sessioned that thing that day. I was like, fuck, this is kind of rad. And so then I convinced my parents to get couple more snowboards in the shop, because I couldn't get any of I skied back then, but I couldn't get any of my ski buddies to snowboard. They were learning, and they just learned how to ski good, so they're like, I'm not going back to beginner status. I can actually ski around the hill now, you know, and control. And so no one wanted to mess with it, because the equipment was pretty, you know, basic back then. No metal edges, just fins. So skier, you could only really ride POW. Like, ride packed was just not really. If you did, you were just like going from one spot to the next POW spot. You weren't like riding groomers at all. So I couldn't get any of them to buy a snowboard or go snowboard. So I was convinced my parents to get a couple more boards in the shop as rentals. I go, well, people may not buy them because they were $90 or something for a snowboard back then. You know, maybe under $100. But no one would buy them, so I was like, let's get some in, and we'll rent them. I go, I can get my buddies, whoever, to rent them, you know. Like, people will try it. They can rent it for cheap. And so we were the first shop, I think, probably in the whole nation to actually rent snowboards. So I had them in the shop, and we were renting them. And then, but it was kind of like a little ploy of mine, so that if they didn't rent, then I could grab them and take them up with my buddies and get somebody to go snowboard with me. So I was like, thought it was pretty cool. But I couldn't convince a lot of other people of what snowboarding was about, you know? And so I had these guys, Craig and Dan Donnelly, and those guys were on the BMX team. And so I was just finally one day, I was like, grab the extra snowboards, grab those guys. It was a spring day, let's go. And we headed up to Baker and went hiking and hiked up Shucks and all the way up to the top of Chair 5 and rode around all up there, hiked around and snowboarded. And of course, like, both of them are pretty good, but Craig was just a natural and just picked it up. Like
even
that,
on the first day, like, kind of thing?
Dude, seriously, like, it was ridiculous. I got a photo, it's somewhere, it's even in one of the magazines, of him under goggles going off one of those, like, stunt cornices, fully on his blue and white Burton Performer Experimental. Same thing, no metal edges, but that was when they finally came out with, like, the V-bottom. It was a triple fin, had the fin in the center, two fins on the side, and then two big wide rubber straps, and then we fashioned, like, these Fastech buckles that went around our heels to help hold our heels. Yeah, first day he was dropping stuff. And at that time, in BMX racing, he was 16 expert, and he was racing against Gary Ellis, who became like number one national champion for years and years, dominating sport. Yeah. Craig and him used to like go back and forth every weekend. So Craig could have went on, like whatever he did, he would focus on it and he would work at it, and
that's cool.
Work hard at it. And,
that's incredible.
So I would just get those guys to go with me, and that's how I got those guys.
So you somehow, while this is all going on, Sims is building these boards that are maybe better suited for what you guys are doing.
Exactly. So first couple seasons I rode those Burtons because this was what I knew about. I hadn't even seen a Sims board yet. And then I saw a Sims, next thing I saw a Sims thing, and I saw the Sims board, and I was just like, wow. It was just a difference between like this kind of crudely made wood board that's like, and this thing that was just like, it was a friggin' work of art, like just the shape, like the nose. You could see the surf influence in the nose shape, and just the side cut, and how much bigger the swallowtails were, and just the whole. And then it actually had these Fast Tech, like it had a heel cup and a toe cup with Fast Tech clips, and I was like, whoa, those things are way better than these floppy rubber things, And a couple of shots of Tom just like, to style and slashing, just looking like he's surfing on a snowboard. I was just like, holy moly, that board looks sick. And like the Burtons were about almost a half inch thick. His were much thinner laminate, like a skate deck laminate, And I was like, well, that's going to work. That thing's going to flex a little better. I think it's going to work better. Pow. So I got one of those. It was funny because all the Bike Factory dudes were all riding Burtons, and that was when the Burton Performer Elite came out with it had P-Tex on the bottom. No metal edges yet, but just P-Tex, same triple fin, but had P-Tex and a little bit better. Those weird red rubbery bindings, where it's like kind of a heel cut, but it was all still super like soft,
Yeah.
And kind of floppy because I think it was more about be able to move your feet around more surf style back then. So I got the Sims. And all the other guys were giving me shit because they all got in the Burtons, and they're like, "Oh, my board's so thin, well, that thing's going to snap.
It's going to break right away.
It's going to break right away."
Yeah.
It didn't, and that was the year that they had some problems with the Burton boards. They were snapping, and it was almost kind of like this. It was this funny thing because I was like, "Well, my board didn't break."
Yeah, you guys had a real kind of camaraderie, like that real boyish, like everybody's ribbing each other.
Oh yeah. We would just like whoever could get down to the chair first was the one that could heckle whoever else was behind them.
Nice.
And yeah, there was a lot of heckling that went on from the chairs and just giving each other bad times. Yeah, it was like kind of part of the whole thing for sure.
So you get this Sims board in, and after a year riding it,
it was convert. And then that was right about the time I went down to the Soda Springs Tom Sims World Championship.
And that was 86, right?
84. That's when I met Tom. Went to that competition. Then that's when we was like, well, we should do a race up in Baker.
Of course.
Because they had the little ditch as their half pipe contest, and then they had a GS or downhill and a slalom course, and that was the event.
Yeah.
And so we came back and we were like all talking about it and how it was cool meeting all these dudes. When I first saw Kidwell and met Damian Sanders as a young kid, met Minnie Shred Palmer, like the Tahoe crew, which is already established. Like those guys were ripping, and like we saw those guys, especially like riding up the chair, watching like Kidwell and I think it was Damian, those guys, and they would do these like 180 nose wheelies where you drag your hands, like wheeling on your nose. And we saw that and we were just like, wow. And a couple other things that Kidwell did that we were just like,
holy
super,
shit!
Like we were impressed with it. We were like, wow,
Kidwell was the very first pro, right?
Oh,
like he was the very first.
Terry Kidwell was like at that time he was like the dude
hands
as far
down.
as snowboarding goes. You watched him and he was like doing the stuff like the most stylish tricks. I remember seeing him do like the basically like a McTwist on a snowboard at that Donner quarter pipe. I think that was like 86 maybe or something like that.
Yeah,
and I was just like. Just blown away, like how he's flopped out his methods were, so much skate style,
Yeah.
And I had this original sticker, and this was probably had to have been like 85 because it was before his round tail. And it's a picture of him doing this stalled out Andrecht on a snowboard with the thing just flopped. It's like one of the sickest, I think, hand plant photos I've ever seen on a snowboard.
That's from 85.
And it's from 85, I mean, and that's when I was just like, this dude is the man as far as freestyle.
It's incredible.
Like Jake had his little crew of dudes, and they were the ones that were going to be in the brochure because they were all the guys that were like right at his access.
Yeah.
Same with Tom and his brochure is like It was whoever was in the Tahoe at the time.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh, there's somebody with a camera? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, so that's who kind of, like, early on, that's how that kind of worked.
Yeah.
And so being at Baker, we didn't get any, you know, we didn't have any coverage because there's no photography, you know, like Tony Welch was probably the first photographer to, like, local guy that was taking photos, you know. We didn't get any of that except for when we traveled to go to, like, the contests, you know, and that's when they first saw Craig or myself or anyone even ride or stuff was like when we come to the contest. So that's when kind of the first photos. But then, of course, 86 was the first one in Colorado. Yeah. Craig got fully hooked up and got in with like Greg Stump and did like the Wrigley's commercial and, you know, all this stuff. And of course, I was off smoking some weed or free riding and not paying attention to that. And so I just kind of missed out on that part of the media at that point. You know, I was just like doing my own thing.
Were you focusing on a career at that time too? Were you?
You know, I wanted to snowboard, but I had problems with injuries. Like every time, like I blew my knee out right before the 86 Worlds, and basically the first year I didn't even get to ride in the half pipe because I dislocated my shoulder. 87 or 88 on opening day at Baker, we had a huge dump. It was like 60 inches of new snow, going crazy, like riding, charging, and you know, at that time I just didn't think about things as much, you know, consequences of what you're doing, and I should have known better to like charge off some of the stuff I was, but totally charged off the same. Landed, and snow was pretty light, so blew through all that snow, because there's no real base, it was just 60 inches of new snow.
Yeah.
Blew right through that stuff, checked a rock with my board, and that pitched me, and then I got pitched and landed on my hip on another rock and broke my pelvic wing. So I wasn't supposed to even snowboard. That was like opening day.
Yeah.
And then Doc says, "Well, you're not snowboarding until next year if this heals up correctly and you walk again right and stuff." That's where all your muscles connect to lift, you know, for your leg to work. And so for another season, I really couldn't do backs. I could do front sides, I could ride, but I couldn't do any backside airs or anything. So that's when my judging career started, because at that point, freestyle contests, they were just grabbing whoever, you know, there's this guy from Ski Patrol, and we'll have those guys, you know, judge the contest. So there wasn't any consistency in judging, and a lot of dudes from Colorado or whoever, California, that were skaters that knew skating and knew difficulty of tricks, and they're like, you know, this stuff's not getting the respect it should because these guys don't even see it. There was definitely a lot of that going on, you know, as far as like Tom was just that tenant. Tom wanted to win.
Tom's building boards that are better than anything that exists on the planet at that time. Those boards grew the sport exponentially.
Yes, that, and when they made, for me, I truthfully believe that when the Terry Kidwell Roundtail came out, that just took the snowboarding to the next step. Because with the Roundtail Kicktail, you were able to do much more of the skateboard style tricks.
Yeah.
And that, to me, it's like everybody that freestyles and likes to, you know, do skate style stuff, they owe Terry Kidwell a big check because he's the guy that made this board happen, you know. If Tom would have focused on the company a little more, then probably everything would have worked. But he was still a surfer and a snowboarder and a skateboarder. So if the surf was good, there wasn't going to get boards built that day. Him and Chuck were going to go out and get the good surf. And if there was POW in the hills, they're going to go get the POW, you know. Which, you got to respect that, because that means he's true. He was true to what he loved, you know. He was like, he did it and he saw vision, but he also was like, well, I still have to do this because it's my passion, you know. And so in some ways, even though, you know, things could have been a lot different for the Sims brand, you know, it could be maybe where Burton is now as far as the company goes. Tom did what he loved every day for, you know, till it was gone. You know, he was still out, you know, slalom skating and snowboarding and surfing, you know, so I have a lot of respect for that. Like, the dude had so much style. You look at any of his shots, or just like him, like, even like, not snowboarding, like the lifestyle shots, you know, he was just a dude, you know, he had the good looking girls with him, he's driving a nice sports car, you were like, I want to be that guy, you know what I mean? Like, and actually the very first Sims ad I ever saw was Lonnie Toft on the Lonnie Toft board doing this like the spring slush, just doing this front side all tucked up ollie. I was like, well, I just totally look at this, really fun. You know, all those shots from the Donner quarter pipe from back in the day, those are the ones where just like, whoa, this just looks like my skateboard ramp that I've been playing on, you know what I mean? Like,
there's a Keith Kimmel shot from that
him
session.
Doing that fakie ollie.
Unbelievable.
And you're just like, oh, wow, you can really... I mean, he made it look like it was like... You're just like, holy shit, that looks sick. It looks as good as, like, dudes on skateboards doing it. You know, like, Keith Kimmel, that's another dude that, like, you know, one of my good buddies that's such a rad snowboarder that's still, you know, out there, loving life, still riding. And to me, it's you get in the mountains, you get into this whole nother world, and it's so great because you can just get away from everything else, and it's like this... It's like a spiritual experience for me. It's just like, And that's where we're really lucky too, is because when you do get to see the mountains around up there, you know, it is just gorgeous. You know, it's just like, wow, you know, it's like, this is every bit as beautiful as any of the European Alps, you know. The only difference is like, you have to earn it more here because there isn't a tram or a chairlift going everywhere, you know. Like, if you want it, you have to go out and get it yourself, pretty much. Snowboarding, because the fact that we didn't like riding hardpack, you definitely were seeking out more, you know, like, okay, well, if it's scary as crappy today, well, we're just going to go hike out here because I know there's still some PAL left out there. Well, what we didn't realize is we were riding that stuff here, and we didn't even know, and then we went up for the first times up to Alaska and did some of those first rides up there, and we're like, wow, this is Baker on steroids, you know. It's just like the same thing, but now instead of a 500-foot little, you know, rad thing, you're doing 2,000 feet of the same kind of gnarly, like, kind of stuff. And you're just like, yeah, just blown away, you know. Like, it's like, this is, yeah, that's when I just came back and I was like, Alaska is amazing, and that's what snowboarding really, really is riding that kind of terrain, you know. And that's
so Sims boards are great, and how does everybody get on Sims?
Well, that happened through basically going down to the contest at Tahoe, and then decided that we wanted to do the banked slalom up here. In '85, we do the first banked slalom. Invite Tom up. He brings up. He helps out the course and everything. Craig, I think, got fourth. It went Tom Sims, Terry Kidwell, I want to say Bob Klein, and Craig got fourth. You know, I already had been in contact with Tom because we were carrying his boards at our shop. Because once I got one, I was like, oh, do these, and the boards are going to have at our shop. So I had been carrying his boards at our shop. So we already had this relationship with Tom. And so then at the banked slalom race, I went and, you know, just went free riding around with him, and that's when I got hooked up too. Like, he hooked up Craig got on the team, and I got on the team. It was a Sims 1500 FE with a carbon fiber graphite in the base because it was supposed to be snappier, and he did that only for the team boards.
And at that time, how close of a friend are you with Craig?
Oh, we're good buddies, and so it was kind of cool traveling around. And the next winter is when they had the contest in Colorado. That's the whole Rankfoot connection, because he had been a skate kid that I'd met skating. He was up watching the banked slalom race, and then he started hanging out and snowboarding a bit and hanging out with Craig. So we all decided that we wanted to go to the Worlds in Colorado. And we're like, how are we going to get out there? And we borrowed Rankwood's mom's Volkswagen van. And it was Craig, myself, Rankwood, Steve Shipsey, and we all drove from there down to Tahoe, met up with Kimmel and Kidwell and all those guys, hung out with everybody there before we drove to Colorado. As we were getting ready to drive to Colorado, Craig swings into Reno. We're like, dude, what are you doing in Reno? He's like, oh, go to the airport. We're like, why are you going to the airport? Oh, I'm picking up Kelly Joe. And that's when they were first starting hanging out without discussing it with us at all. But yeah, it was just a funny little side story, Craig, sneaky moves. But anyway, so all the Sims board stuff's going on. We're going to these different contests. I hurt myself, and so I decided that I wanted to get involved with judging because there wasn't any real consistency in judging at that point. And I felt that, you know, my background with skateboarding and knowing snowboarding, that I could help bring some sort of structure to the judging end of snowboarding. And so I got involved with judging, ended up being the head World Cup judge for a season and a half, and got to travel around, was judging all the contests. And
did you get slack from people? Did you instantly become that person that they're like, fuck, Jeff, you can't make your friends win or whatever?
Well, no, there was a lot of that. I mean, there was people that thought that, you know, oh, Craig's winning because Jeff's the World Cup judge, you know, which wasn't true. If anything, I was harsher on Craig than anyone else.
Of course,
because he was my friend, and I was like, I don't want to. For me, it was just trying to get a panel of judges that knew what was up, you know, knew different tricks. Because like at that point, snowboarding was evolving so much that there was new tricks. Like almost every contest, some kid was pulling off something new, and so you had to figure out the whole amplitude and consistency, difficulty, and trying to get all that stuff and getting that ironed into a good format and have good judging. But still, even to that point, no matter what, it's just 5 people's opinion. So not everybody's going to be happy, and different people are going to see it different ways. Right, and then was when the Sean Palmer Craig Kelly battle was kind of going on, and that was kind of like the Christian Hosoi Tony Hawk battle.
Totally.
Same kind of deal. Craig was super technical and doing these really difficult for the time, you know, like back-to-back 540s, difficult tricks for the time. Nothing compared to what they're doing now.
Right.
But and then Palmer was just coming in, you know, going bigger than anybody else, like boosting, and still doing some difficult tricks, but definitely had the amplitude. So then there was this whole thing of what scores better, you know? Is it amplitude or is it difficulty of trick, So there was even arguments between the judges of who they thought won, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And so there was that whole aspect of it that went on.
That's cool. Did you, were you involved in Jacoby's J-Tear thing?
Well, at contests, at ski things, they said, oh yeah, you can have a freestyle half-pipe contest here, but no inverted aerials. You had to touch. So he had already been doing those without that, so he's like, okay, I'll just touch my hand down.
Yeah.
And so, that was the
kind of brilliant.
It's kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
And then there was the whole thing, for a while there, everyone had to really watch. Did he really touch?
Yeah.
If he didn't touch, got to disqualify him,
Isn't that insane?
And I just thought that was so stupid, It's like, come on, you got freestyle skiing going on over here on the other slope where these dudes are doing triple tuck, whatever off the jump. Plus, then the pipes weren't anything like they are now. It's like it wasn't a 22-foot pipe with 22-foot air. So the risk of life and limb were not anything like they are now. I mean, you could get hurt, but nothing like compared to what the risk is these days.
Absolutely.
So to me, it was just like, God, these policies are stupid. So
So where did you fall on that judging? What was your personal opinion? Did you think the Palmer style of blasting should get scored higher than the technical
just to me,
stuff?
I would do to each event and how well they used each pipe, and because the championship in Breckenridge that Craig won, personally, I thought Palmer won. I can say now because it's how many years later. Palmer scored higher than Craig did on my card, but it's 5 judges, so I think Craig won that year, and so Craig won. But in my opinion, I thought Palmer had won that year because he was just boosting he rode that pipe so well that. The same thing in Japan was whereas there was the World Cup event in Japan, and same thing where Craig won, or maybe Palmer won that. Well, anyway, it was real close again, and once again I thought Palmer had won, and Craig was also riding, he'd won so many events that he was at that point, where he was on this crest of it's trying to knock off the world champions, whatever. You have to be so much better to beat him. If your run was close to the same, then he was probably going to win just because he was on top. And so people he was setting the standard.
You becoming an actual pro rider for Mike and Pete.
Yeah.
And how cool was it to go to those guys with a proposal here's the contract?
I didn't actually go to them with the contract. I was getting boards from them, and they actually were the ones to me and were like, here's money to do this. I mean,
Who was on the team for Mervyn at that time? Is it pre-Matt Cummings?
No, Matt was on the team. Matt's been there forever. Let's see. Jason Bass, Dave Lee, Todd Swasher, Brian Hartman, Joey McGuire.
Wow.
It was a big crew.
That's a rad crew of people.
There's more. Of course, Jamie. Jamie had his stuff. It was a big crew, and it was really really fun because if you went and did stuff, every once in a while we go do stuff together, go do filming or whatever together. And that was just such a rad crew to be with, You go to the trade shows, and they were the ones that had the funniest booth, because they were just... So for me, I was super stoked. I was getting paid just to go ride powder, basically. I'd get a monthly thing, and they'd give me a travel budget, and they'd go, here, go produce. There wasn't too many other companies, I think, at that time that were just letting people... doing it in that style, here, because at that point their lib was anti-contest.
Yeah,
they're no, we're about riding. Go ride POW, and go do what you love to do. You don't have to win anything because as long as you're out on your snowboard, you're winning. They were the leaders at that point. Other snowboard design was kind of stale. These guys were no, we're going to do this different because Mike's there's all these aerospace composites and all these things that we can use instead, And that was when snowboarding was all after my judging thing, and then they were all oh, snowboarding can't be like skateboarding. You can't have these gnarly graphics and blah blah blah. Mike's oh really? I'm going to do a 185 with a skeleton over the whole top sheet.
Incredible.
I just love the fact that they were you can't tell us what to do. It was for me. It was really cool because I got to try a lot of weird design boards and different stuff that worked, stuff that didn't, and. It was just, I loved the fact that I was, got to ride for those guys for a while. It was great.
So your nickname was Jeff Old Dog Fulton, is that right?
Actually, for me, it was Ranquit and those guys called me Grandpa. Ranquit called me Grandpa. A few other people called me Grandpa because that one kind of stuck. Yeah. And Dan Donnelly always used to call me Four Eye because of wearing glasses. Dan's now got to wear glasses because he's getting old. He's over 40. Once you get over 40, you got to wear glasses.
Yeah.
So I just like the other guy was like, ha ha, 4 eyes. And give him a little dig on
it
Facebook.
Comes around.
Like,
he's another guy that when you see him on the mountain, he's not riding groomers. He's out getting in it.
Yeah.
And then second of all, he's got a big smile on his face. He's just like a big mountain host. You know what I mean? And he still has his stuff where he's like, well, we don't tell people about that.
Oh, yeah. He's still got a few secrets up the sleeve. And, as he was known in Hollywood, because he was like, his was the first snowboard interview that he had more lifestyle shots than action shots. He was the first person ever that had that. That's when he got his nickname Hollywood, because we always gave him shit about it, But yeah, he was a stylish guy, and like a lot of his crews, like how smooth his power turns were, like those old the great old Greg Stump movies, Blizzard. I can't remember which one it was. Like one of the old Greg Stump films that he's in. He's riding some big mountain stuff, and he's doing some just big, beautiful turns. You're just like, wow, that's.
He designed that board really well. The Ecstasy?
Oh yeah, it had a really nice, well-shaped tail, a nice shaped nose, and one thing they had going for him is Jason Kasnitz. I don't know if you know who this guy is. He was the head, involved with the whole snowboarding design, and he is like one of the original Mount Baker dudes, cool, hardcore guy. I think a lot of the shapes and all of that, because a lot of the good shapes at that time for K2, because they did have some good shapes, were because of Jason being involved and being.
They had that factory too, there.
Yeah, but the problem was I don't think he had enough influence on the actual build of the boards as far as doing instead of doing inserts.
Yeah, because they had engineers or whatever.
Well, engineers and they're all in ski background. They were like, oh no, this works great for our skis, so it's going to work on your snowboard.
So you've got all these buddies that are in all these different directions, really influencing the direction of snowboarding. Who would you say influenced the most?
Well, of course, Craig is the one because, he came from a engineering and chemical engineering background, so he's very smart, well-educated kid. And so he was the first rider to be able to go to Jake and go, oh no, we want this kind of side cut and we want this profile, and be able to explain it in terms that the engineers can understand, because he's speaking their language, And so he was the first one that really, I think, influenced a lot of board shapes and board design. It was either him and then of course Mike Olson and Pete over here with LibTech doing their completely own thing, separate from everybody else, and being okay, we're just going to try this because we
flop
can try
kicks and deep side cuts and
hollow air core,
just those air ribs,
right? All that kind of stuff. That was a lot of their designs were just the boards did ride great, and that's another funny story. So at that time, Mike and Pete were still making all their boards were being made in Austria, and there were these it was the Canoe anti-gravity, and they were 1/66, so they were big, and they were probably a half-inch thick in the center of the board. They were just big, stiff planks. But Carter was riding for Canoe at that time, but he was getting ones that were made by Mike and Pete that were they called them the race rooms because they were made in the States, down in Ballard there, in Seattle at that time, right on the lake. And so Carter was getting it was the same board, but it was all handmade, so it was good flex, it rode good. And so Carter would be up charging Baker on this Canoe board, and Bass and Loeb and all those guys saw Carter on this board, so they all went and bought anti-gravity. And these kids, they were small kids at that time. They weren't big. So here are these little kids on these friggin'
66
gnarly 66
jumps.
boards that wouldn't even flex, And they were just out there trying to ride that stuff. And in some ways, I kind of think that's what made them good, strong riders, because struggling on those things, once they actually got on a real board, they were just wow, this is easy, Because they had to have been struggling on those.
As we're seeing the magazines go from this to this, and there's car ads in there, and there's perfume samples or whatever the hell they've got. Were you starting to get miffed with snowboarding at that point? It would be 93 to 99.
No, at that point, that was right when I was actually, traveling a ton for Mervyn and getting to ride POW and going up to Alaska and doing all the Alaska stuff. So I was for me, I was just whatever the rest of the stuff, I'm going to go ride. And then got to go travel and go film in Japan.
Sick.
I rode Japan, and I was just oh shit, this this is incredible. So we rode that place, you know, it was Tenjin Dyer, which is kind of like Baker, but even, you know, like it's got this tram that takes off in the parking lot and takes you to the ski area, so you can like poach all these runs down to the tram. I was like, holy shit, this is what's, you know, like just traveling around and finding all these little funky little areas. So I was kind of into that for a while.
What were your favorite trips? So obviously Japan blew your mind.
Probably, I think that trip was probably one of my best trips ever. I mean, Alaska, there was some sick stuff up in Alaska, but that one in Japan was like 2 weeks just hanging out with Craig, and we hung out that ski area, Tenjin, and like there's this guy who's now runs the ski area that was like a cat driver at the time.
Cool.
Like, you know, young kid. And like Craig was like snowboarding god at the time. And so every morning that guy would come and wake us up before they even started the chairlifts. He'd come wake us up, have us go, come get in the cat, and then he'd take us up to the top. So we get these, you know, these power runs with nobody, not even the patrol out yet. And that time, like when we were there, it was the most snow they had had in 50 years. In Japan, and like it would dump every night. It would dump almost 2 feet every night. It would be clear at 6 in the morning. We'd get up. It'd be clear. It'd be clear till about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then the next storm would roll. It would dump all real. And it was just, that was probably my best trip ever.
Is that I'm thinking of the footage where you were talking about where you spray Craig?
Yeah,
that's from that trip.
Yeah, that's
who was filming that?
Jacques Rousseau.
Jacques.
Yeah, and it's from the video Exit.
That was really the heyday of snowboarding right there, right? When you've got videos driving the industry as opposed to contests. Correct. So Craig could make the transition from a contest rider to a free rider, and it blew everybody's mind.
Oh yeah, everyone was like, "You can't do that." Oh yeah. He's like, "Well, I don't care. I'm going to go do it anyway. Whether if people follow me or do anything about it or not, this is what I have to do, you know. I need to go ride powder. It's what makes me feel good, you know. Plus, I think he's at that point where he's like, you know, I've done it. I've won everything there is to win. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many more times do I need to win a half pipe contest? You know, I've won it all several times over. I've really enjoyed, you know, like for me, it's like I'm not getting any spiritual enlightenment out of riding a half pipe. But when I go up into the big mountains and get up there somewhere, you know, however I get there, get out in the mountains, I'm feeling, you know, this is me, you know, I am.
Did you have any conversations with him around that time?
Yeah.
About that stuff?
Yeah, he was just, you know, he just wanted to get out, and he was just like, I just like to ride powder, and I just don't want to be, I want to be away from everything, and just want to go ride powder and explore and adventure, and, you know, he was all about adventure, you know, going and seeking out new places and new things and checking out new, you know, like.
Did you go and ride with him up at Island Lake?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
That place must just be amazing.
Yeah, that was good. I had a good time up there.
Yeah.
Our 5-star restaurant with good powder too. Like the food there was so, like when I stayed there, the food there was so good. It was just the whole trip was just like.
There's nothing better than good terrain with a helicopter.
Oh yeah.
Like
for me, it's the whole. Like Alaska adventures were so fun just because it was still new, and there wasn't a lot of rules or regulations or you have to have a ski guide or whatever. It was just like, there's the heli, go buy your chips, go give them to Chet. He'll take you. You point out where you want to go, and you go there, you know. And then you'd fly over. He'd be like, all right, there's the LZ. Your job is to make it there, and I'll pick you up. And then he'd fly you to the top, drop you off, and you'd be like, okay. And then he'd fly away. He's like, okay, I got to pick up someone else. You're like 60 miles out in the middle of nowhere, you know. You watch that helicopter fly away, and you're just like, oh, fuck. What did I just get myself into, you know? Like, if he doesn't come back, I am not getting out of here, you know? Like, or I'm going to be fucking walking for a long friggin' time, and I don't really have the supplies with me, you know? Plan for that kind of stuff.
Okay, so in those early days of helling, were you heliing with no backpacks and stuff, too?
No, we had a backpack. So, we did a little, I mean, when we first get there, you'd have to do a little bit of peeps practice and stuff, because that was kind of like my first... Hellying up there was my first experience with doing, you know, actually having to have a peeps, you know, because even though we were riding stuff here, we were kind of clueless about it back then, you know, we didn't know, I just didn't know that much about mountains or about snow, you know,
totally.
That stuff, and just...
You were kind of going on feel.
You went on feel, and you'd know, like, you'd be like, the conditions are horrible, I'm not going out there, but you didn't know, like, well, there wasn't any requirements either, and so we just didn't even really think of, like riding out of bounds of Baker at that time, we didn't really think of it as the same as going to Alaska where you're, like you said, you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Absolutely. Rankwit said that he would get up in the mornings in Alaska and he would just be shitting himself.
Oh, like for me, I was like, those times was the most adrenaline I've ever had run through my body in a day ever. Like, because you get up in the morning and you're already just like, because I'd never really flown in helicopters before this, and I'm not really a fan of flying, period. Like, I don't like being out of control, some situation where I'm at it, like something breaks, you're going to fall for a while before you... Yeah. But anyway, so I'm already kind of a little bit gripped about that. Then you get in this helicopter with an ex-Vietnam pilot that's a little bit crazy. The dude, like, he definitely, you were white knuckled when you're flying in the copter because he wasn't afraid to, fly wherever, put wherever if you wanted to go there, he'd put you there. And then the descents, you're like riding down stuff and you'd be like, okay, I kind of locked in my mind, but I'm not 100% sure. Like, I know there's that big cliff. Because when you get off the top, everything kind of rolls over, so you can't really see, until you actually get in and you get like the fourth or fifth turn into the whatever slope you're riding, and then you're like, okay, it's but that first little part, you're gripping. And then down at the bottom, some of those things you're riding down on the actual glacial field, and there are some crevasses and some stuff, and so, like, I just remember one time I was like the LZ was down there, I was like, okay, I just gotta get through this. And I'm like, just kind of doing these turns, kind of starting to because it was kind of just real low grade. And I'm like, okay, I'll just do these hop turns. And I'm like, hop, and I'm like, it was like crevasse. And I'm like, just barely cleared over the crevasse. And I was like, holy shit, I better pay more attention to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's right about the time that I remember Matt Goodwill, fell into a crevasse. So I was just like, wow, I guess I got to be more careful.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, the adrenaline at those times, just because of everything we did too, a lot of it was first descents, stuff that no one had ever been down before. So you're out in these helicopters without a guide, even in no guides.
You guys are going like, I think I can do that.
Yeah.
And then you get to the top and you're like, I'm not sure I can fucking do this.
Yeah, or just like there'd be times like some of these fucking spots where you get let off, it'd be like the spine, like he couldn't even actually land. He'd come in and he'd hover and touch with the runner on one side, you jump out, and then you'd have to fly around and turn around because the basket was on the other side, and you're like, so that moment you're up on this peak, no snowboard, nothing, and I was like, wow, this is not a really good situation, like, I really feel more comfortable with my snowboard on my feet than just standing right here.
We had zero respect for how fucking gripping that shit was. You'd get in a video and you'd see the pow turns and you'd be like, fucking, let's see some fucking park shit. Let's see a big jump line or whatever. And now I go back and rewatch those videos and I'm just, like Dave Hatchett's ascent in...
I know which one you're talking about.
It's an absolutely beautiful, cinemagraphically, they nailed it. And he's like, nobody knew if it could be done.
Yeah. And then the other person, and he was in that crew with them, was Noah Slasnick.
Yeah.
And some of the lines he did back in those early days, the early TB days, and some of those spines and stuff. I mean, it almost stands up to today's riding.
I think it does. Like nowadays, if Travis Rice goes somewhere that nobody's ever been, well, he's already ridden a bunch of places that are like that.
Right.
But yeah, that's what you guys were doing.
Yeah. Alaska was totally like that. It's just like, just didn't know. We'd be like, okay, go with it and see what happens.
That's incredible. So did Craig get you on some trips that you otherwise wouldn't have gone on, or were you just...
Well, I was doing that stuff, but the Japan trip worked out really well because he was like, you want to go film in Japan? And I was like, oh, heck yeah. I'm going to say no to that. Craig helped in a lot of ways, definitely, I got to say that I rode his coattails a bit, as far as that goes.
Sure.
Because if it wouldn't have been for him and, everything he did, then I probably wouldn't have got, made the contacts and had the connections and the things that I did, just because,
So did you do some ambassadoring for the sport as well, like kind of like places that you went, like meet with the operational managers or whatever?
We did a lot of kind of the promotional works like that a bit, and I did a camp over in Japan for a couple of 2 winters.
Snow camp in the winter.
Mm-hmm. It was like kind of like Baker too. It was like, well, at that point Baker was starting to get real busy, and so Japan was a refresh because you'd go there, and people that were there were only riding their groomed runs. They didn't venture off they didn't ride POW. They didn't ride any of it. Like, well, for one, the spirits are in the trees.
Yes.
So they don't go in the trees.
Yeah.
So you had all that. You're just like, there was so few people around that knowing it, you'd be kind of sneaky about it. But the only one that got me was like this one spot. There was like this Resutsu, this one resort, and it had this gully that came down through the trees. It was just this perfect little half pipe. You know, you could slash the banks. But it was kind of closed. But well, I'm American. I can't read Japanese. You know? So me and Craig, that was when I was over there with Craig too, and we just kept poaching this run. And the lift guy at the bottom kept saying something to us, but we were just like, yeah, you know. He was like, yeah, wave our hands, get back on the chair, go back up, you know. Yeah. Finally, like after about our fourth time down through there, he gets and he stands in front of us and he's just all, and he just gives us the big X with his arms and just like points at the gully and just all, X. And we're like, oh, okay, we get it now, you know. We got to do good 4 runs before we had to leave, you know.
There's a part of Baker that up above the canyon, that fall line's so good. And we've done that where Pro Patrol has been like, okay, so you're the guys that are doing that. They were nice to us. But god damn it, it's tempting to hit good shit when it's good. You
know, and I will say that the patrollers up there, they're all good guys and they all get after it. They all love skiing, and most of them, I mountain bike with them in the summer and stuff. So these guys are, they're chargers. They're not just some hodad. You know, the guys know what they're doing. They've spent their time up there, and they got a really tough job handling, especially with the crowds anymore, and everybody wanting to be out back. Yeah. So they've got a hard job, but I think they do a great job of just like that, being respectful of your average person and not just going off on them, but just saying, hey, do you realize where you are and what you're doing, Yeah. And they can see they've got an experience of watching people over time that they can, just by watching someone, they can tell whether they know what they're doing or not. Right. And so then that kind of helps them in their assertion of the situation. Yeah, it was funny because it used to be like, especially when there was just the upper lodge, mm-hmm. We would ride and we'd go at lunch and it'd be like, dude, check out my tracks on Dolphins, like, look, I jumped off the corner, because it'd still be there at lunch, you can go back at lunch and your track would still be at Dolphins.
It's one track,
So yeah,
that's incredible.
We had it so good. So in some ways, I feel very lucky of growing up when I did, because I was, there for the start of BMX, start of motocross, the start of BMX, the start of snowboarding, downhill mountain biking. I've gotten to be on the leading edge of all these sports that I absolutely love, all of them, and to be able to be involved with them when they were all so young and fresh and be able to do it just for the fun of it. It's just, I feel very lucky that I was born in the era I was,
That's the best, dude. FNRad shoutouts this week to our guest, Jeffrey Fulton. Thanks for being such a big supporter of the show. It was rad to see you at our live show where we were recording with Terrier, and it was super nice of you to let us into your home. Right on. And thanks to all you listeners out there. Come back next week for another episode of the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast, brought to you by BR Productions.
I definitely can't ride at the level that I used to be able to ride at. So for sometimes this kind of gets frustrating just because my body's getting old and worn out, and there's like I see these things, I want to do these things, but sometimes my body just won't allow me to do it anymore. It's like my back, so many years of abuse on my back and knees mm-hmm. that it's tough, and in some ways I just don't learn my lesson. I still go out and, I just broke myself last weekend on my downhill bike. Went over the bars and did a full front flip and landed on my ass. And totally just jacked my lower back again, it's been a week of just struggling to even go to work,
Yeah,
It's just God, is it, I keep questioning, I was man, I should just put that mountain bike, the downhiller away for a while, but that'll last another week until my back starts feeling better again. That's it.